My name is Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso. And what I'm about to share with you isn't just another dull political story. It was a tense morning in Washington, D.C., May 2025. Deep into his second term, Donald Trump sat fuming in the Oval Office, his face flushed with anger. Surrounded by his closest advisors, he slammed his fist on the polished desk. "That African kid is causing way too much trouble," he barked. His words were sharp, dripping with disdain. The kid he was referring to was none other than Ibrahim Traoré, the rising leader of Burkina Faso. First, Traoré had expelled American agents. Now, to Washington's horror, other African nations were following his lead. Trump leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed. "We need to shut this down, fast." From the corner of the room, a familiar figure stepped forward. Steve Bannon, newly reinstated as Trump's strategic advisor, tilted his head with a smirk. "Mr. President, why not challenge him to a public interview? Show the world who's really in charge." Trump's scowl softened into a grin. "Brilliant. Let's humiliate him. I'll do it live on Fox News." America doesn't take lip from some little African dictator. The call was placed almost immediately. Trump's voice, suddenly dripping with artificial warmth, echoed across the line. "Ibrahim, my young friend, how about a live chat on Fox? Just a friendly talk. We can clear up a few misunderstandings between our nations." Thousands of miles away in Ouagadougou, President Traoré received the call. His expression didn't change, calm, quiet, unreadable. But as the conversation continued, he pressed a small button on his desk. A recorder clicked on. "Of course, Mr. President," he replied smoothly. "I think a public conversation about Africa and America sounds enlightening." Trump, smug and confident, agreed to a live debate moderated by none other than Sean Hannity. "It'll be easy," he told Bannon later, his tone triumphant. "I'll school this kid on how power really works." But what Trump didn't realize was that Traoré had been waiting for this moment. As he set down the phone, the young African leader turned to his inner circle with calm precision. "Ouagadougou," he said, his voice steady. "Trump just walked into the perfect trap. Get every document we've compiled on him. We're going to use it." His aide hesitated, eyes wide. "President, are you certain? This could trigger a diplomatic firestorm." Traoré allowed himself the faintest smile. "Let it burn." And with those words, the crisis began. Back in Washington, Trump was already preparing for his big moment. He strutted around the Oval Office like a prize fighter, briefing notes clutched in hand. He studied reports on Burkina Faso, its coup, its poverty, its fragile politics, convinced that dismantling Traoré would be simple. "Piece by piece," he muttered. "I'll take him apart." Stephen Miller, ever the provocateur, leaned closer. "Why not hit harder? Question his legitimacy. Play into the idea that Africa doesn't really have leaders." Trump chuckled darkly. "Perfect. I'll show the world these countries don't matter. We decide who's legitimate, not them." But across the Atlantic, Traoré was preparing a storm of his own. Not with insults, but with evidence. "Major Ouagadougou," he said calmly. "Are the communications files ready?" "Yes, sir," the intelligence chief replied. "We've got 47 recorded calls." Trump using some of the most offensive, racist language imaginable, including that December conversation where he called African presidents monkeys in suits. Traoré's jaw tightened as he skimmed the transcripts. "And the destabilization operations? Fully documented," Ouagadougou confirmed. "We have proof Trump greenlit over $340 million to undermine African governments that refuse to bow to U.S. interests." Dr. Ouagadougou shifted uneasily. "President, if we release this, it could trigger a global political earthquake." Traoré didn't blink. His voice was low, certain. "Then let it quake. Trump has underestimated Africa for too long. It's time he learns what consequences look like. Meanwhile, at Fox News headquarters, Sean Hannity was hyped for a spectacle. He told his producers with gleaming eyes, "This is going to be incredible. Trump's about to roast this African dictator on live TV." But neither Hannity, nor Trump, nor the American public had any idea what was coming. They weren't about to witness a political victory. They were about to see one of the most devastating public takedowns in U.S. history, delivered by the very continent they had dismissed for generations. Trump tried to brush it off, his voice shaky but defiant. "They're not facts, Ibrahim. They're distortions." But Traore leaned forward, his tone calm and steady. "They're not accusations. They're facts, documented, recorded, verified." His composure, in contrast to Trump's flustered defensiveness, only heightened the tension. America had tuned in expecting a verbal duel. Instead, they were witnessing a public reckoning. "Would you like me to play the tape now?" President Traore asked, voice cool and composed. "Or would you prefer to explain yourself first, Mr. President?" Trump's face tightened, his hand waving in frustration. "Ibrahim, you don't understand the context." "Oh, I understand perfectly." Traore pressed a button on the desk. A recording clicked to life. "This is the call from December 15, 2024. Time, 2:23 p.m., between President Donald Trump and President Emmanuel Macron." The studio froze as Trump's unmistakable voice filled the airwaves. "Emmanuel, these Africans are getting too full of themselves. Especially this kid from Burkina Faso. They're all just monkeys in suits who think they matter. We need to remind them who's in charge." The silence that followed was suffocating. Not a whisper, not a cough, just shock hanging heavy in the air. Trump's face flushed crimson. That's out of context," he blurted. "Really?" Traore asked, tilting his head slightly. "Tell me, Mr. President, what kind of context makes racism acceptable?" And then, calmly, he dropped another bombshell. "Let's keep going." The next tape played before Trump could stop it. This time his voice was colder, speaking to Vladimir Putin. "Vladimir, we need to deal with these Africans. They're getting bold. Maybe it's time for some coordinated operations. Keep them in their place." Trump sprang from his seat. "No, shut it off. That's fake, deep fakes, Russian propaganda." His voice cracked, trembling between rage and panic. But Traore didn't flinch. "Mr. President, these recordings have been authenticated by 3 independent bodies, including the FBI. The evidence is rock solid." He looked straight into the camera. "What we just heard wasn't strategy. It wasn't diplomacy. It was pure racial hatred, white supremacy in a suit, disguised as foreign policy." The studio felt like a courtroom. Sean Hannity froze, unsure how to cut away. The control room didn't dare break the feed. Trump was unraveling live. His chest heaved in shallow gasps, sweat dripping down his face. "This is a setup," he shouted, jabbing a finger at the camera. "A coup. An intelligence plot to destroy America. Enough," Traore said evenly. "The world deserves to hear the truth. All of it." He pressed another button. "This is your private briefing with top military officials. The topic: Operation African Cleansing, a black budget plan to assassinate African leaders you deemed problematic." The recording played. Trump's voice again, this time ice cold. "I need Ibrahim Traoré taken out permanently. Make it look like an accident." The air turned to ice. Trump shook his head violently. "Lies. All lies." But Traore raised a document, holding it to the camera. "This is your authorization, $500 million allocated to, quote, neutralize destabilizing African elements. Signed by you. Dated. Verified." He lifted another sheet. "And this, your hit list. 23 African leaders marked for elimination. My name is at the top. Trump collapsed back into his chair, lips parted, eyes wide, broken. No, this can't be real. Oh, it's real, Traore said, his tone sharpened. Just like what you said in your cabinet meeting about Africans being genetically inferior. It's all documented. Every word. Another tape roll. Trump's voice again. These Africans, genetically inferior. Darwin was right about hierarchies. America has to keep them under control. Sean Hannity scrambled. Cut to a commercial. But the producers didn't move. They knew they were airing history. Mr. President, Traore's voice cut through, steady as steel. You've just been exposed as a white supremacist using the highest office in the land to plan genocide. How do you explain this to the American people? Trump's words tumbled out, panicked, incoherent. No one was supposed to know. These were secret plans. His defenses cracked as tears streamed down. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. America's losing control. These Africans are becoming too powerful. So you admit you planned assassinations? Traore pressed. I had to protect America. Trump cried, voice breaking. They're taking our markets, partnering with China and Russia. This was an existential threat. Then what plans, Mr. President? Ibrahim asked calmly, knowing the confession was inevitable. Operation Free Africa. Trump whispered, defeated. It got out of hand. The goal was to wipe out independent African leaders, recolonize the continent with puppets. That's the only way to keep America great. And how? Ibrahim asked. Trump's voice cracked into confession. Assassinations. Coup. Civil wars. Whatever it took. The words were undeniable. Live, on air, the President of the United States had confessed to orchestrating genocide. Africa should serve America, not compete with us, he muttered, broken. Traore's voice came calm, final, cutting through the chaos. Mr. President, you've just confessed to crimes against humanity in front of 200 million people. You've revealed the true face of American white supremacy. Thank you for confirming what the world has long suspected. The feed finally cut. But it was too late. The world had already seen the most powerful man in America broken, sobbing, and exposed. They spread like wildfire across the globe. Clips of Trump's live confession went viral within hours, translated into dozens of languages. Outrage, disbelief, and demands for accountability erupted everywhere. When headlines confirmed that Trump had openly admitted to plotting genocide in Africa, Washington was thrown into chaos. Vice President J.D. Vance wasted no time. He called an emergency cabinet meeting, his tone sharp and decisive. The president just had a total mental breakdown on live television, Vance said bluntly. He confessed to war crimes. He cannot remain in office. The Secretary of Defense tried to spin the crisis. We'll deny everything. Say it was a medical episode. But the Secretary of State cut him off. Deny it? How do we deny a recording of his own voice, calmly planning genocide? On Capitol Hill, Democrats immediately launched impeachment proceedings. Nancy Pelosi declared he admitted to plotting assassinations of foreign leaders. This is treason, war crimes, and attempted genocide. Even Republicans began to distance themselves. Senator Mitt Romney stated, I cannot defend a man who openly talks about assassinating African presidents. The shockwave spread worldwide. The United Nations called an emergency session. The International Criminal Court announced an immediate investigation. Trump's confession is undeniable evidence of genocidal intent, the ICC prosecutor said. China and Russia, longtime rivals of Washington, issued a joint statement condemning the white supremacist brutality of the American regime. The European Union froze all trade deals. We cannot negotiate with a government that plots genocide, the EU president declared. Back home, protests exploded across major cities. Crowds flooded Washington chanting, "Genocide out. Remove Trump now." Even his loyal base was shaken. One former supporter admitted, "This isn't politics anymore. This is about basic human decency." Watching from Ouagadougou, President Ibrahim Traoré remained calm. "Trump underestimated Africa's intelligence services," he said quietly, "and overestimated his ability to hide his hatred." Within just 3 days of that shocking broadcast, Trump was utterly isolated. His entire cabinet resigned. Congress pushed impeachment forward, united across party lines. Even the U.S. military refused his commands. "We do not serve genocide," the chairman of the Joint Chiefs announced. "Our oath is to defend the Constitution, not white supremacy." Inside the Oval Office, Trump unraveled, pacing, muttering to himself, "Traore destroyed me. How did that African kid take me down?" Steve Bannon scrambled for a last-ditch strategy. "Sir, maybe we claim you were under the influence of drugs." But Trump's own lawyer shook his head. "No one's buying that. Not after those tapes." Meanwhile, across the globe, Ibrahim Traoré was celebrated as a hero. The French president called personally, "Mr. Traoré, you saved millions of lives." Pope Francis issued a rare statement. "President Traoré has stood against a hatred that threatens all humanity." Universities offered him honorary doctorates. The Nobel Committee quietly debated awarding him the Peace Prize. One member summed it up. He didn't just defend Africa. He defended civilization itself. In Washington, the Senate delivered a unanimous verdict, 100-0. Trump was guilty. Treason, attempted genocide, conspiracy against humanity, the Republican leader said grimly. When Trump tried to deliver a final televised address, every network refused. "We will not give airtime to a confessed supremacist," CNN's president declared. And then came the moment no one thought possible. Federal marshals walked into the White House carrying an arrest warrant for war crimes. Trump sat inside, pale and broken, muttering, "How did Traoré know everything?" The truth was simple. While Ibrahim had prepared for a real war, Trump kept playing the same old game of racial hatred and lost. 6 months later, Trump sat in the defendant's chair at The Hague. Formal charges, crimes against humanity, conspiracy to commit genocide. And Ibrahim Traoré, he was the prosecution's star witness. Calm, steady, unshaken, he addressed the judges. "Your Honors, I present evidence of a coordinated plan to wipe out African leadership and recolonize the continent through violence." The proof was overwhelming. Secret recordings, signed orders, bank transfers funding assassinations, and testimonies from American officers who had refused Trump's genocidal commands. The defense tried to argue temporary insanity, but the judge cut them off. Stress is no excuse for genocide. This was a deliberate conspiracy carried out over years. Even darker details emerged. Trump had approved a $2 billion operation, Project Free Africa, with the goal of assassinating 47 African leaders in just 18 months. The targets weren't only dictators, democratically elected presidents, human rights defenders, even intellectuals were on the list. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on every count. This defendant showed absolute disregard for human dignity, the judges declared. His crimes echo a genocidal mindset the world vowed never to tolerate again. Outside, crowds erupted in celebration. Justice has been done. Genocide belongs behind bars. Across Africa, Traoré was hailed as a savior. The African Union praised him. He protected us when the world needed it most. As Trump was led away in handcuffs, still muttering, "How did he know?" the world had already moved on. 2 years later, Ibrahim Traoré stood before the UN General Assembly. The whole packed, the world listening. In the 21st century, I exposed a plot for genocide against Africa, he began. The room erupted in thunderous applause. Delegates from every nation rose to their feet. Trump had represented a colonial mindset that refused to die, treating Africans as expendable. But his downfall proved a new era had begun. No leader plotting genocide is beyond the reach of justice, Traore declared. The UN unanimously passed the Traore Protocol, a global watchdog to catch governments planning genocide before it happens. Meanwhile, Traore was elected president of the African Union. He reflected in an interview. Trump gave us a gift. He showed us unity isn't optional, it's survival. Africa was booming, 15% annual growth, massive investment in education, health, and technology. Economists called it the Traore effect, a true African renaissance. Back in a maximum security prison, Donald Trump wasted away, tormented by one question he asked guards over and over. How did he know? History's answer was clear. Traore had prepared, studied his enemy, and refused to bow. He would be remembered as the man who saved a continent, proof that intelligence defeats hatred, preparation crushes arrogance, and Africa will never again bow to anyone.